Welcome to the Liberty Alert with Gregory Seltz, sponsored by our friends at the Lutheran Center for Religious Liberty here in Washington, D.C., a program that cuts through the chaos and confusion in the culture today by talking two-kingdom citizenship, bold biblical principles for a robust public Christian life. And now your host, Dr. Gregory Seltz.
Good day, Washington, D.C., and friends of the program all around the country. I'm Gregory Seltz. Welcome to the Liberty Alert, where every week we try to cut through the noise and take on the issues, especially the public issues that matter to people of faith. You know, we try to rely on the wisdom of the Word for the sake of the culture and the mission of the church. Or as we like to say at the LCRL, we're trying to put our temporal liberties to work for the sake of the eternal liberties of God for all. Today we are talking with Deaconess TIFFANY MANOR, who served in positions of church worker wellness, human care, Synod's Ministerial Care Coalition. The one that I also saw in your bio, too, was that you were a volunteer counselor at a pregnancy resource center. My wife served as a counselor at a pregnancy center in New York City when we were really involved with the life ministry on the streets of New York. Tell me a little bit about that. That had to be tough work, but really blessed work.
Oh, you're absolutely right. It was such a blessing to be with women who were facing challenging life situations, to walk with them, to share the faith with them. I served at a pregnancy resource center in the Detroit metro area. So we were the closest pregnancy resource center to the Detroit city lines. So we had a quite varied clientele. By God's design, I ended up with a client caseload of mostly teenagers, actually. Wow. And the pregnancy center director was like, wow, they all seem to come in when you're working. This isn't scheduled, and we're not necessarily sending them to you. But that became my specialty area. And boy, I love those women and helping them to understand how they could carry their babies and build a family on God's design. Precious times. I actually really miss being involved more in a pregnancy resource center locally.
Yeah, you know, that's how my wife explains it too. I mean, you're right on the front lines, and you are able to give a whole different vision of life for some of these girls who are in crisis, obviously. I didn't know you were in Detroit. I mean, I'm a Detroit boy, so it's great to talk to you, and I really do appreciate your service in my hometown. But today, you are the Director of Life Ministries at the LCMS, and for those of you who don't know, Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, it's the conservative branch of the Lutheran Church, and the church has been involved in life ministries forever and ever and ever. But now we're getting even more focused. Tell us a little bit about your work as the director of life ministries for the LCMS.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you brought up that the church has been involved in the sanctity of human life forever. I mean, we're talking millennia here. And we also know that there's thousands of people out there in the church. I mean, we have millions who are really passionate about sanctity of human life and really engage in this important work. So as the director of LCMS Life Ministry, I work with a really great team. We provide practical resources for congregations and districts, and we help people to be involved in a greater network throughout the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod to strengthen the pro-life work that's being done. We have a lot of great collaborations throughout the Synod, like with the Lutheran Center for Religious Liberty. We have fantastic life recognized service organizations. Commission of Theology and Church Relations in our church body is really engaged in helping us articulate our theology and our understanding about life, the beginning of life, the end of life. You know, our work is got a lot of emphases. We tend to be focused in really three areas. We say that the work of the church in life matters is speaking up for life, advocating. That can be informally, like marching, reaching out to policymakers and legislatures by individuals. And of course, you know, the important work that you're doing with the Lutheran Center for Religious Liberty. That's right. Really important advocacy the church is doing. But then there's also another area, caring of mercy work that the church does. And so that's the pregnancy centers we were just talking about, maternity homes, congregational diaper drives, and the one-on-one care that Christians provide for people in life situations. So that's the caring and mercy work. And then the third area is teaching about life, education. And this is done in Lutheran families, Christian families, parents teaching their children. It's the catechesis in a congregation where people are taught about the sanctity of human life and how God is the the creator, the designer of life and the family. And also, our LCMS schools, our colleges, our seminaries. So LCMS Life Ministry is working and always serving in all of those three areas.
You've got it all covered. That's a lot. That's a broad group to work with, and I really do appreciate you providing great resources. And again, the LCRL is here. One of the fundamental things we fight for on the Hill is obviously religious liberty, but sanctity of life. And one of the reasons why is because the sanctity of life is for everybody. It's foundational to who we are as human beings. And even our founding fathers understood that. That this idea that every human life has dignity because it's created in the image of God. There is no America without that fundamental teaching. And that's I think what's going on. There's a fight between a secular view of human beings are just utilitarian, or no, human beings really have a sanctity and a dignity to their lives. And I think that's what's going on, because life had a big day this month. It was December 1st. The Dobbs case was argued before the Supreme Court. And for those of you who don't know, we've been talking about the Dobbs case a lot, and we participated in the stuff here on the Hill. But the Dobbs case goes right to the heart of abortion. Right now, people are told that if the baby isn't viable, the state gives you permission to abort it, to dismiss it, to kill it. Now, you think about that for a minute. What is the state's main role in life? It's to protect the innocent, to protect the vulnerable. But in this one case in America, if the child or the person is vulnerable, they're allowed to be dismissed. Well, that's at the heart of the Mississippi issue, is this viability. So we had a big day that Wednesday here in Washington. But Tiffany, I know you had prayer services, I think back in St. Louis, maybe around the country. Tell me some of the things that you had going on with the church.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Dobbs versus Jackson case that really is focused on Mississippi, but it's applicable to the entire country. So it's really wonderful that the Supreme Court decided to take that up and to hear the oral arguments and receive all of the briefs on that from a lot of organizations across the country. And as the church, as we were talking about, there's certainly a role to advocate, to speak up. Now, when it's in the judicial branch, like a Supreme Court case, right, we don't have the opportunity to necessarily approach those justices and share our thoughts and our individual opinions. And as Christians, we really, our prayers are addressed to the Lord. And so there were people praying across the country. A lot of our partners are organizing prayer initiatives, Alliance Defending Freedom and others for the months between the oral arguments on December 1st and when we'll get the word from the Supreme Court as to their decision on that particular case. Right. So in the LCMS, we did put together this prayer service for life. It was held in multiple places throughout the country on November 30th, the night before the Dobbs v. Jackson oral arguments. But it also, this prayer service for life will be continuing in congregations locally in the weeks and months to come. So right, on our website, there's a bulletin that's ready to go. We tried to make this really easy for the local parish pastor. Our worship department here in the Office of National Mission and Chaplain Sean Denzer put together this fantastic prayer service that you can download the bulletin ready to go from our website at www.lcms.org. And a pastor could take that and they could have a prayer service in their sanctuary anywhere. But certainly on November 30th, we were praying across the country and really beseeching our Lord for his wisdom to be shared. But it was also a service where we lamented. We lamented these millions in the U.S., 64 million babies lost to date to abortion around the world, hundreds of millions. So our prayer service was to lament to our Lord, to beseech him to change it, to end abortion. And we're talking about not just ending abortion through a Supreme Court case that, while very important and could make a big difference in the United States, there's other work that the church has to do to end abortion in people's hearts and the desire that they have to have these really very sad sacrifices of children's lives.
Yeah, I mean, again, what's happening in the Supreme Court, for those of you, I mean, even if the court really does overturn Roe v. Wade, which is It's not in the Constitution, folks. I mean, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, virtuously, self-discipline, those are the inalienable rights. Abortion is not a fourth right. It's not in there. You can amend the Constitution and put it in there. If I don't think that would ever happen. And you can vote it in legislatures, which we're seeing in states across the country. But you cannot just create it out of thin air and put it in the Constitution. It's not there. So let's say they do their job. I think this is the thing that concerned me, Tiffany, December 1st, when I was there, is I was listening to a lot of folks talk about this. If the court does its job, the issues surrounding why people abort children today are still going to be there. Sexual libertinism, anti-family views of life. We don't want to raise our children. We'd rather the state raise our children. Those issues were all over the place on the Hill. And so my question to you too is our church and are our churches, are we ready for a post-Roe? Because if Roe v. Wade is overturned, it's actually the conversations for this kind of stuff are just beginning, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So the pro-life movement has been prepared for a while now that when, and I'm going to say when, I'm not going to say if, but when Roe v. Wade is overturned, that we know that what's going to happen is this is returning to the states. Right. Now, of course, in Dobbs, we heard the counsel, the attorney for the state of Mississippi, argued that, as you said, abortion not being found in the Constitution, so return it to the states, return it to the legislative process, return it to the people. Well, for us in the church, returning the issue of abortion to the people means that we have the opportunity, and we've had this opportunity, and we've been doing this work for years, but being involved in the lives of the people who are vulnerable to abortion. And the work that we can do so that we can share Christ with them, so that we can lift up the family as the very best institution that God has designed for children to be raised in. It include the teaching that men are involved in the lives of the children, that it's not just about the woman and the mother. So in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, we actually, on the day of the oral argument, Dobbs v. Jackson, we announced a really important initiative. President Harrison, the president of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, released an initiative, a grant process for our congregations to continue the work that they're doing and do even more in preparation for walking alongside families and mothers and children and fathers. So we're calling it the $1 Million Life Match. And our theme scriptural passages for it is found in 1 John chapter 3. But this is going to be $1 million that our synod is putting to combine with money from our congregations for local mercy work at the beginning of life done in communities all across the country through our congregations.
Great.
So this can be all kinds of pregnancy and infant support outreach or partnership with pregnancy centers, our recognized service organizations. But these are opportunities that the United States pro-life movement has known will increase once Roe v. Wade is overturned.
And that's, first of all, that's great. It's really interesting. And in our work here on the Hill too, one of the things we've had to fight for is foster care work and things like that, where the governments were starting to shut these down around the country over our view of the traditional view of marriage. And people don't realize that things like foster care, pregnancy centers, actually aiding people in crisis so that they can see that they and their child are precious to God, and they and their family are precious to God. And that includes the man, that includes the extended family. All that stuff has to be taught back into people because they've actually been told that none of that matters anymore. And so what a great opportunity to do this. And it's interesting to me that the same people we're fighting on the Hill for religious liberty are trying to thwart us there. So I'm excited to hear that you're resourcing that, because that's the one thing we never really seem to have compared to our opponents. They have lots and lots of cash, but we have a real care for the actual folks that we're dealing with, and that's what makes this different.
It's love. I mean, it's our love in action.
Yeah, well, and that's one of the reasons. I mean, you're never going to replace the church's work in cities because with secular work, you're just not going to, because the church doesn't. The church does it for the sake of love. Governments do it for the sake of a job, but a church does it for the sake of love, and that's a radically different way to do it. And it's a way that is going to hang in there even when you're faced with all kinds of obstacles. Now, you know what was really interesting about what I saw on the Hill, and I don't know if you're seeing this out there too. the pro-life movement is becoming incredibly diverse. Now, in some sense, that obviously that's a great thing. And when I say diverse, I'm saying even diverse in terms of ideologies. So it wasn't just ethnicities and people of color versus white folks and stuff like that. It was also, there were atheists for life. There were LGBTQ people for life on the steps. And I didn't fully understand their arguments because I was listening to the slogans, but I thought, wow, they're here, wanting this stuff overturned too. So are you experiencing that? Because on the Hill, these are things that even people who don't have a religious faith are saying, yeah, but we think life is sacred. We think life is precious and we're willing to stand for life. And I think that's a pretty exciting thing.
Yeah, I'm seeing the same thing that you're seeing as I've spent time in our LCMS Life ministry across the country. So not too long ago, I was in a city more towards the western United States, and I was on a sidewalk outside an abortion clinic, shoulder to shoulder with people who are not Christians, a variety of people, people who are atheists, maybe of different ideologies around the family. And we do always say that in the kingdom of the left, our work is stronger and our voices are louder when we're standing with people who are life-minded. We may not be like-minded in all the other ways, but we have the same mind towards life. And the way I understand it, really, and I was listening to, I'm sure, some of these same speakers that you were listening to when you were there on the steps outside the Supreme Court, but I really reflect on the natural law that God has placed in all of our hearts. In Romans chapter 2, verse 15, right? We know, and this is where we see evidence that even if people are not believers in Jesus Christ, that they have this natural law. And so they're recognizing that a child created, they may not understand the creator, but they recognize that this child's life is precious. Right. And so for me, it's kind of exciting because as I am shoulder to shoulder with these people, it gives me opportunity to witness to the truth, to the law, as well as the gospel, and explain to them how, you're understanding part of it, but here's the rest and the fullness of our confession of the faith. And this is why life really matters. The God who created it, Son who was sent to earth and died and was resurrected for life. So it's the Holy Spirit, right? It gives us all these opportunities. The Holy Spirit's transforming and changing hearts. And in pro-life circles, we have these opportunities to talk with this variety of people with different ideologies and witness to them for the faith. But yeah, you're right. There's a big variety.
I love what you said, that they're life-minded, not necessarily like-minded. So, they may not be, they can look at a star and see the beauty of God's creation. They may not be astronomers. And there comes a point where having the rest of the story is a beautiful, beautiful thing. But it was, again, when we're caricatured, we're always caricatured. That's what I find out in all the news reporting here on the Hill. We're always caricatured as very narrow, coming from one ideological point of view. And I'm sitting there going, no, there's a lot of folks out here who are saying life matters. It's a foundational thing. And like you just said, God actually puts a ground floor of civility, or a ground floor of natural law, a ground floor so that a society can be built on that. Can't save yourself that way, but all hell breaks loose when there are people coming and say, we don't want foundations and we don't want ground floors. And we're dealing with that kind of stuff on the Hill. There are people who would love to rip up the foundations of humanity and see, and just ensue with chaos. So again, like you said, we can be, I love that, life-minded, even if we're not totally like-minded. And that's a beautiful start. Now, you talk about witnessing, and I just got to share this with you because I think this is probably a lot of what you do with people around the country. So December 1st was a political day. There's no doubt about it. We want the court to say, we don't decide this issue. This is an issue that the people got to deal with. In fact, I think it's bigger than that. I'm not sure we decide life. There's a sense where life is an inalienable right. It's foundational to who we are. So again, we could talk more about that later. But once the politics of this is put in its proper place, then the conversations ensue. Well, there was this gal that was walking around, and I took a picture and I posted it on my Facebook page, and she had this beautiful picture of Jesus. And this woman had this incredible countenance. She was just so gentle, and she's walking around. She's walking through the crowd, and so I just said, "Hey, I gotta have a picture of you and this." She goes, "No, just take a picture of Jesus before the Supreme Court." Anyway, she's that kind of person. But then I said, "Well, what are you doing? I mean, you seem to be walking," and she was mostly on the pro-choice side of things. And I was seeing these placards where people were saying, I had an abortion and I'm proud of it. I mean, it was so, some of the things that were said were just so in your face. And none of this, we need to have it legal and rare. We heard that phrase 10 years ago. This was, no, we need to have as many as we want. And so she goes up to these folks with those placards. I said, well, what do you do? And she goes, I go up to them and say, do you regret ever having your abortion? And I was like, okay, what do they say? And some say actually yes, and others say get in my face. And then she goes, well, I regret when I had mine. And then she uses that as an opportunity to talk about obviously the truth of abortion, but then obviously God's forgiveness and God's mercy. And her countenance was so gentle and precious, but courageous and firm. I could see her doing all kinds of stuff amidst this incredible event that day. So is that the kind of stuff you're talking about, giving people resources, giving people an understanding of how to deal with their own pain, and then bring it all to the cross, and then finding a way to actually then go out and serve? What are the resources that you're putting forth so that our people can actually realize that we're broken folks, but we've got a message and we can help other broken folks?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a beautiful story that you shared. And so often we are talking about, that relationally and one-on-one, how you can interact with people. And so, we do provide a lot of resources from the church. We just want to get these out into as many hands and homes and congregations as possible. So we make a lot of them available online on the LCMS.org webpage. Got a whole life library of topics. If there's a certain life issue or bioethical issue, we've got hundreds and hundreds of resources there to learn about. But we're also really getting involved with training, helping people to understand how they can have those conversations. So even in collaboration within our national mission, Everyone His Witness is now just releasing a module, which it sounds like the woman you met there on the Hill, she may not have needed that training because she's doing exactly what it was on. She's figured it out. It was intuitive for her. But there's a module in our Everyone His Witness, caring for people who are post-abortive and who are hurting and suffering under that. And you've been relating how Satan is attacking through these claims. We just see evidence of that with some of the things that were happening. There were people there outside the Supreme Court who seemed to be actually having a chemical abortion. They were taking the pills while they were there. I mean, that's kind of glorifying that's all Satan. That's all of Satan, because he wants to divide and kill and separate people from Christ.
Yeah, follow us over the cliff. Follow us over the cliff together. It was amazing to see it.
But if so what we want to do is help train people so they can understand how to share the gospel and how to point to Christ and all that they're doing. So there's Everyone His Witness. We've got a learning management system. And so there's a lot of opportunities. There's folks across the country, Speakers Bureau, who will go in and they'll work with youth groups, college groups. So LCMS.org is the best way to connect. We're pretty comprehensive, and we're even teaching at very young ages, and we're rolling out more resources focused on early childhood and elementary school ages to understand that life begins at the moment of conception, and that what's in the womb is a girl or a boy created by God inside their mom's womb. So lots of things there. So LCMS.org to check it all out. But I'm sure whatever people are curious about, we've probably got something either in the works or available.
Well, it's been great to talk to you today, and it's exciting to hear that you have all these resources. And again, our work on the Hill is to undergird your work. We say it all the time. If we do our job really well, all we're doing is keeping the public space of the church's service. When you're serving others, we're keeping that legal. We're keeping the government off you, but the work still has to go on. And so even if we did our job really well, the church really still has to be the church in the neighborhood for others. And it sounds like you're doing that, and you're preparing people to do that. And to me, the life issue is one of the best places to start. So Tiffany, it's been great to talk to you today. God bless your work, and we look forward to having you on the program more in the future.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always a delight to talk with you, Greg, and the work that you're doing with Lutheran Center for Religious Liberty and that, the two kingdom theology. It's super important. So thanks for making sure that our elected officials do not forget about the church.
They won't. All right. Thanks again, and we will talk with you soon. It was great to hear from the LCMS Lutherans for Life today, and I really was especially impressed with the $1 million grant that they're making available to various churches of the church body, because you've got to have resources to help care for people out there in this whole issue. So the political part is to make sure that we have a foundation for life and protecting life voices out in the culture, but the service that needs to take place, no matter what, undergirding families, supporting people who are going through difficult situations, foster care issues, adoption issues, all kinds of things that the church has always been on the forefront. Those take resources. So it's great to see that happening with the church. And I love that phrase, we need more people who are life-minded, even if they're not totally like-minded with us on this. And that's what I do a lot on the Hill, is that since these are foundational things for our culture, we have to learn how to reach across the aisle, reach across the fence, and find people who have the same view of what foundations we need in this country, and the sanctity of life is one of those issues. So I love that phrase, more and more people who are life-minded, even if they're not totally like-minded, and hopefully we can then still share the gospel so they can be like-minded as well. So this may be a pivotal year for the Sanctity of Life Foundation for our country. And remember, Roe v. Wade was imposed on this country in 1973. There were all kinds of movements that were happening in the states that were undergirding the sanctity of life. And then suddenly, the justices imposed a universal support for abortion and said it was in the Constitution. And it wasn't, and it still isn't, like we've been talking about. And that's really what the Supreme Court decision is all about. And since then, remember also, there's been 64 million babies who have been aborted since Roe v. Wade. And also remember the eugenics movement, the racist underpinnings of Planned Parenthood and all of its abortion clinics. And so to that degree, we have to also remember the challenges that are coming. So the work we do here in Washington, D.C. to keep the government in its proper place, to lay that proper foundation of humanity and civility, that's the LCRL's work. And then groups like the LCMS Lutherans for Life, and all the life organizations on the Hill, the work then to extend God's mercy into people's lives. That's the work that the church especially is geared to do. So what an important year this can be. Keep all this stuff in your prayers. Thanks for tuning in today. To get to know our LCRL DC work better, check out our website at lcrlfreedom.org. Contained there are resources to empower your public square dynamic discipleship. Or check out our weekly Word from the Center opinion piece every Friday at facebook.com/LCRL Freedom. Till next time, God bless you always. I'm Gregory Seltz. Have a great week.
You've been listening to Liberty Alert with Dr. Gregory Seltz, Executive Director of the Lutheran Center for Religious Liberty in Washington, D.C. This program has been brought to you by the Lutheran Center for Religious Liberty.